Imagine buying your dream home, the place where your family's future will unfold. Now imagine receiving a letter, just days later, from someone who claims they've been watching that house for decades. Not just watching, but controlling it. And they know you're there. They know about your children. This isn't fiction. This is the chilling true story of 657 Boulevard, a house that became a living nightmare, and an unseen tormentor known only as the Watcher. The Broadus family had found their perfect place. It was a beautiful, spacious Dutch colonial at 657 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey. This town was known for its safety, its charm, its quiet, tree-lined streets. It felt like the ideal spot to raise their 3 young children. They closed on the house in June 2014, paying over $1.3 million. It was a huge investment, a symbol of their hard work and hopes for the future. They pictured years of happiness within its walls. For a few brief, shining days, the house felt absolutely perfect. Just 3 days after closing, before they had even moved in, the dream began to curdle. Derek Broadus was at the house, perhaps checking on renovations. He walked out to the curb to get the mail. Among the usual junk mail was a thick, plain white envelope. It was addressed simply, ominously, to the new owner. There was no return address. He opened it, expecting perhaps a welcome note from a neighbor. What he found instead was a typewritten message that instantly sent a jolt of cold dread through him. The tone was possessive, unsettling, and deeply wrong. Standing alone in the empty house, a wave of confusion and disbelief must have washed over him. Was this a joke? A bizarre prank? Westfield was idyllic, but maybe even perfect towns had their strange inhabitants. Could it be a disgruntled neighbor? Someone who didn't want new people on the street? Or maybe someone who had lost a bidding war for the house? The Broaduses were new to town. They knew no one. The contrast between the peaceful suburban setting and the dark words on the page was jarring. It felt invasive, personal, and fundamentally sinister. This was no friendly welcome. The letter contained a claim that was both specific and bone-chilling. The house, it declared, has been the subject of my family for decades. Let that sink in. Not just known, but the subject of intense focus for generations. What could this possibly mean? Was this person connected to previous owners? Was it a long-held, dark secret tied to the property? Or was it something far stranger, a self-appointed, obsessive guardian of 657 Boulevard? The phrase, "subject of my family," suggested a deep, almost hereditary connection, stretching back years, perhaps even before the Broaduses were born. Their purchase wasn't just about their family. It was terrifyingly about this unseen person and their family's pervasive link to the house. The joy they had felt just days before began to crack under the weight of these words. Confusion gave way to a growing, sickening unease. A cold shadow had fallen over their dream before they'd even spent a night there. Their excitement was tainted with dread. Every creak of the old house, every shadow could now feel like a sign of the unseen presence. They had bought a home, hoping for sanctuary, but it seemed they had also acquired a menacing secret. This disturbing envelope was not just a peculiar note. It was a detailed, deeply unsettling introduction from someone who signed off with a name that would forever haunt the Broadus family: the Watcher. What other chilling details did this first letter hold? Who was this Watcher? And what did they believe their decades-long fixation entitled them to? The family's peace of mind was instantly shattered. Those first typewritten paragraphs planted seeds of fear that would rapidly grow, poisoning their dream from its start. They were left with terrifying questions. Who was watching them? Why them? This ominous welcome, so frighteningly out of place in their supposedly safe neighborhood, was not an isolated event. It was the first whisper of a terrifying nightmare just beginning to unfold. Their beautiful dream was already starting to crumble. Likely standing together, perhaps in the empty living room, the Broadus family reread the letter. The words twisted their hopeful beginning into something dark. It wasn't just a strange message. It was signed, offering no comfort, only a new name for their fear. The Watcher. This signature gave their unseen correspondent an identity, a terrifying one. A title promising continued observation, a constant, unseen presence. The letter detailed an astonishing claim, a long-standing, rooted obsession with 657 Boulevard. The Watcher asserted this vigil was a family tradition, passed down through generations. He wrote of his grandfather watching in the 1920s, his father in the 1960s. And now the letter declared it was his turn. Imagine the deep chill. Not a random act, but a perceived legacy of watching, a dark inheritance. What could they make of such a statement? Was this person delusional, lost in a fantasy about the house? Or was there something more, a hidden dark history connected to 657 Boulevard they had unknowingly entered? Could individuals, generations of a family, truly dedicate parts of their lives to silently monitoring this single property? The idea felt impossible, yet the letter presented it as cold fact, a generational commitment to surveillance. Then came the direct possessive assertion. The Watcher asked, "Who am I?" and answered with chilling confidence, "I am the Watcher and have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now." Control. Not just watching, but control. This single word escalated the menace. How could someone who didn't own the house, unknown to them until this letter, claim control over it? It painted a picture of someone feeling ultimate authority, regardless of legal ownership. This assertion of control had an immediate, profound effect. The Broaduses had just poured their savings and hopes into this house, believing it theirs. Now this Watcher told them he was truly in charge. It would make anyone feel an unwelcome guest, an intruder in their own sanctuary. Every floorboard, every wall they planned to paint suddenly felt under the jurisdiction of this sinister, invisible presence. Their new home felt compromised, violated. The letter continued its psychological assault with intrusive questions. "Do you know the history of the house?" the Watcher demanded. "Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here?" These weren't curious inquiries from a friendly neighbor. They were challenges, almost accusations. The question, "Why are you here?" carried an implicit message. Your presence is unexpected, perhaps unwanted, and needs justification to him. It suggested the family was trespassing on the Watcher's domain. Any sense of security the Broadus family clung to was dissolving. They were actively observed, that much was clear. They were questioned, not by authorities, but by an anonymous individual with an unnerving fixation on their home. And they were judged, their very presence in the house scrutinized. The excitement of owning a new home rapidly changed to a gnawing fear and a constant, unsettling feeling of being exposed and vulnerable, even within the house's supposed safety. This first letter was a comprehensive introduction to their nightmare. It laid out the Watcher's supposed lineage of surveillance, his claim of dominance, and his unsettlingly personal interest in the house and its new occupants. The audacity and possessiveness were shocking. What other disturbing details did this initial, lengthy communication contain that contributed to their growing terror? What else did the watcher claim to know or intend to do based on this proclaimed decades-long dominion over 657 Boulevard? With these words, the watcher had successfully established a terrifying, almost tangible presence in their lives, even without showing a face. He wasn't just a distant observer, he claimed a deep, historical, and almost proprietary connection to the house, along with a deeply unsettling interest in them, its newest inhabitants. This letter, received just days into their ownership, irrevocably confirmed their worst fears. This was no ordinary welcome to the neighborhood. It was a clear, calculated declaration from someone deeply disturbed. The unease from the first letter deepened as more arrived at 657 Boulevard. Any hope that it was an isolated incident vanished. With each new communication, the watcher's tone grew. It was no longer just unsettling, it became persistent, more possessive, overtly threatening. The watcher seemed bolder, the letters like unwelcome updates, proving he meant to continue his campaign of terror. What made these new letters profoundly disturbing was the watcher's clear shift in focus directly to the Broadus children. This wasn't just about their new house anymore. It was intensely personal, targeting the family's core, their most vulnerable members. He referred to the children chillingly by their birth order, a detail showing he was watching closely. He even used nicknames for them, demonstrating an observation that was specific and deeply invasive. Imagine the parents' cold dread realizing this person knew their children intimately. He then asked if they'd found what was in the walls, a disturbing, cryptic question, hinting at sinister secrets they were yet to uncover within the house itself. Was this a metaphor, or something literal and horrifying? Then came a phrase striking pure, visceral fear into Derek and Maria. The house, the watcher wrote with chilling clarity, needs to be filled with young blood. The reference was unmistakable. He directly meant their children. This wasn't a vague, dismissible threat. It was a specific, almost predatory desire expressed for the most vulnerable family members. Imagine, as a parent, reading such a cold declaration about your own children. Your children, the very reason you bought this home, described not as individuals but a resource, young blood, to satisfy a dark need of the house or its guardian. Any parent's protective instincts would scream in absolute alarm. The letters also provided terrifying proof these were not idle threats from afar. The watcher detailed specific observations, things only known by someone nearby, someone actively monitoring their movements and all activity at 657 Boulevard. He noted the contractors hired for initial renovations, showing an awareness of who came and went that was deeply unsettling. Even more disturbingly, he described seeing the children themselves. He wrote specifically about them playing outside, noting their actions and childlike joy. This meant the watcher had a clear vantage point, a way to see onto their property, observing their family during private moments as they explored their new surroundings. This active surveillance transformed the threat from abstract words to something immediate and terrifyingly real. It wasn't a distant enemy. It was someone close, perhaps a neighbor, or someone with an easy view of their home. Westfield's idyllic setting now felt like a well-laid trap. Where could they go if the watcher was always observing? The sense of exposure was constant, unseen eyes on them near the house, making every moment feel watched, every window a potential viewing point for their tormentor. The watcher's words about the children grew more sinister, focusing on parts of the house with unnerving detail. He asked chillingly, "Will the young blood play in the basement?" Or are they too afraid to go down there alone? What parent wouldn't be horrified by this pointed query? But he added a menacing detail. I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. This painted a terrifying scenario. Children isolated in the basement, their potential cries for help completely unheard, amplifying their deepest fears about the house itself. It was a masterclass in psychological terror. Psychological pressure on the Broaduses intensified with each letter, especially those targeting their children with such graphic, terrifying scenarios. The threats and observations were designed to unnerve, to make them feel powerless and constantly watched. Their sanctuary at 657 Boulevard now felt like a hunting ground, a place of danger. They were prey, stalked by an invisible predator who knew their children's nicknames and movements. The peace they sought was utterly gone, replaced by a pervasive, sickening dread. How could any family proceed with plans under these escalating, targeted threats against their very children? The dream of moving into 65 Addis family's life abruptly stopped once the house was sold to new owners, a silence almost as unsettling as the communications themselves. The mystery didn't just fade away, it endures, a cold case that continues to baffle and disturb those who know the story. What drove this phantom to dedicate so much energy to tormenting a family they seemingly didn't know, all over a house they had legally purchased? The very heart of the Watcher's terrifying narrative, the part that truly chills to the bone, was the persistent and deeply unsettling claim of a long-standing family duty, a generational calling tied to 657 Boulevard. The Watcher wrote, with an air of solemn, almost grim responsibility, "My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time." Think about that statement for a moment. Was this the rambling of a profoundly disturbed individual, lost in a grandiose delusion of ancestral importance, spinning a twisted fantasy to justify their disturbing actions? Or could it, however unlikely it seems, point to some deeply buried, perhaps dark, local history, a secret feud or an unspoken proprietary connection to the property that the Broaduses had unknowingly stumbled into? The assertion of a multi-generational watch elevates the Watcher from a simple stalker to something more mythic, more deeply entrenched in the house's very fabric. It suggests a history of surveillance woven into the very foundations of 657 Boulevard. Trying to understand the Watcher's motivation leads us down a shadowy path of speculation, with several unsettling possibilities. Could the Watcher have been a former resident of 657 Boulevard, someone who had lived there in the past and developed a profoundly unhealthy, unbreakable attachment to the physical structure, unable to let go even after it was no longer theirs? Perhaps seeing a new family, the Broaduses, planning to make changes and create their own memories, triggered a deep-seated resentment or a desperate need to reassert their perceived connection. Was it a territorial dispute of the most disturbing kind? Another theory points towards someone with a deep-seated grudge, not necessarily against the Broaduses personally, but perhaps against wealthy newcomers moving into the established Westfield neighborhood. Was it a form of twisted social commentary? An act of intimidation rooted in class envy or a resistance to change? Or, and this is a deeply troubling thought, was the Watcher a person suffering from a severe mental illness? Someone who had constructed an elaborate, dark folklore around the house, casting themselves in the role of its eternal guardian, its protector, its avenger. This individual might have been weaving their own terrifying narrative, where the house itself was a character, and they were its chosen servant, acting out a delusion. The letters themselves offered small, unsettling glimpses into the Watcher's mindset. There was a mention of the house's centennial approaching, and the watcher described feeling its call. These particular phrases suggest more than just a casual interest. They imply a profound, almost spiritual or mystical connection in the watcher's mind. The house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was an entity with a will, a history that the watcher felt uniquely attuned to, perhaps even compelled by. This perceived call could have been interpreted by the watcher as a mandate to observe, to control, and to ensure the house was treated according to some unspoken personal criteria, especially concerning the introduction of young blood. This then raises another perplexing question. Was the watcher genuinely a succession of people across different generations, a dark family legacy passed down like some sinister heirloom? A secret passed from father to son, a duty to observe 657 Boulevard? Or was it more likely a single, disturbed individual who cleverly adopted this fabricated lineage as a way to amplify their menace, to make their threats seem more deeply rooted, more historically significant, and therefore more terrifying? The idea of a secret society of watchers is certainly cinematic, but the reality of one person creating this persona to instill greater fear is perhaps even more disturbing in its calculated cruelty. The complete lack of resolution, the fact that no one was ever caught, means that all these theories remain pure speculation. There are no definitive answers, only more questions piling upon unanswered questions. This absence of truth, this void where an explanation should be, significantly adds to the chilling nature of the entire case. It allows the watcher to remain a truly amorphous figure of fear, a boogeyman whose motives are as shadowy as their identity. The human mind abhors a vacuum, and in the absence of facts, our imaginations can conjure even more terrifying possibilities for who the watcher was and why they did what they did. The sheer idea that someone, or a lineage of someone's, could sustain such a focused, disturbing, and ultimately harmful interest in one single property for so long, whether that claim of decades was real or fabricated, is profoundly unsettling. Most people's interests and obsessions shift over time, but the watcher's fixation on 657 Boulevard appeared unwavering, a constant, malevolent presence in the background of its history. It speaks to a level of fixation that is difficult for most to comprehend, making the watcher an almost mythical figure of suburban dread. What kind of mind dedicates itself so relentlessly to such a strange and sinister purpose? What is the lasting impact when such a terrifying mystery, one that strikes at the heart of our sense of safety, remains completely unresolved, leaving only cold speculation in its wake? The actual truth behind the watcher's claimed multi-generational vigil, their specific motivations, and their identity remains completely unknown, lost to the shadows from which the letters first emerged. This makes the case of 657 Boulevard a potent and deeply chilling example of how the human mind, whether through delusion, malice, or profound illness, can create terrifying justifications for long-term obsession and psychological torment, leaving behind a lasting legacy of fear, unanswered questions, and the haunting thought of who truly watches, unseen, from the fringes of our lives. This enduring enigma, the story of a dream home turned into a source of terror by an invisible antagonist, starkly highlights the unsettling vulnerability we can sometimes feel, even in the places where we expect to be safest, even within the walls of our own homes. The watcher's typed words twisted a beautiful dream into a real-life nightmare. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? That sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones hidden, their reasons buried in shadows. The story of 657 Boulevard doesn't have a neat ending, leaving us all with a shiver. It makes you wonder, how much do you really know about your own neighborhood? Who could be out there watching when you don't even suspect it? What do you believe was truly driving the watcher? I'd love to hear your theories down in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into unsettling true crime mysteries. Stay safe and keep watching, because you never know who might be watching you.